You shelled out somewhere between $13,000 to $20,000 for the coding bootcamp. Is it worth it?
For me, absolutely. I remember paying around 13,500, 14,000. My first job, I mean, it paid itself back, 3 or 4 or 5 times over. I was able to get in an industry. I landed my first beginner junior developer position at 65K a year, which was amazing to me because when you go from making, 25, 35 a year to like suddenly hitting 65, 70, you feel amazing. Right. So for me, that was immediately worth it just because I was able to double my salary pretty much instantly. And from there, once you are into the industry and you start gaining some verifiable experience, the world opens up for you. I'm very grateful, and I don't take for granted the progress that I've had. I have my progress in both like my careers, my skill set, my salary has again had a meteoric rise.
Hello and welcome back to Custom Journeys, the podcast that highlights Black and Brown voices in STEM. My name is Eliseo Iglesias, and I'm here with my co-host Andrew Baines. Please watch, like, and subscribe to the pod on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and YouTube. You can follow the pod on Instagram by searching for @CustomJourneys. That's CUSTEM Journeys. We're really excited for today's guest today, and his name is Joél Ramirez, and he is a software developer as well as a content creator. You can find his YouTube channel, Joxel, that's JOXEL. And if you want to find out more about Joel, you can also go to his website, joxelstudios.com. Thank you, Joel. Almost called you Joxel. Thank you, Joel, for coming on today.
No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to have another place where I can, just share my wisdom and experience and try and encourage more of us to join, the STEM industry.
Yeah, man. Just to echo Eli's statements, thanks again, man. Really looking forward to this. I was checking out your YouTube channel earlier last night, and then actually leading up to maybe like a week ago. So I think you got a lot of good value you can add to people and hopefully encourage them to pursue a career in tech. So I'm really excited to kick this off. So, man, I was watching one of your videos and you were talking about like your experience with being laid off. So I really want to just kind of start off with like where you're at now, because I know we've had discussions offline, and since you got laid off, you've been like pursuing a few different opportunities. So I kind of just want to open the floor for you to kind of tell me like where you're at right now in your career and what you're working on currently.
Cool, man. Oh man, listen, the last 3 months of my life have been a roller coaster, right? Of highs, lows, and everything in between. Yeah, unfortunately, I did get laid off from the last startup I worked at, and it was an unpleasant experience. Getting laid off in startups is nothing new. It happens sometimes. Things don't go according to business plans. But my point of contention with that particular experience was just more so about how it was handled. But as for where I am now, I am pursuing a couple of different opportunities. In fact, I just joined the team at Quirk Chat, founded by B Law, and just came back from Tulsa literally last night from a founders boot camp funded by Lightship Capital Ventures and their foundation. So a lot of great stuff that I was able to learn and absorb there, being able to surround myself with other people who are about something, who look like us and who are building like their own empires, and they're being supported by their community. And it just really validated everything that I thought I knew I wanted. And overall, it's been an amazing experience. But as of right now, like I said, I'm in between starting at QuirkChat while also doing a couple of things on the side with my content creation on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and then a couple other side projects I have working on.
Okay, cool. Hey, so I know like the founders boot camps and boot camp accelerators are really starting to pick up now, and I'm glad to see that, especially to help like Black and Latino people get it into tech and into entrepreneurship. What was the name of the one that you attended earlier this week?
So one I attended earlier this week was the Lightship Capital Bootcamp. So they have Lightship Capital Ventures is basically a venture capital fund that is specifically geared towards investing in Black founders and entrepreneurs, and mostly entrepreneurs of color. And giving them the funding they need, to fund, their empires essentially. But they have a nonprofit organization called Lightship Foundation. And through that, they hosted a boot camp where they selected a couple of really high potential startup founders and their businesses to bring in, basically put them in a 2-day intensive on teaching them everything they need to know about securing the highest valuation possible, handling negotiations, scaling their businesses, et cetera, et cetera.
Gotcha. Dope, dope, dope. All right, cool. All right. So, man, I got like a ton of questions I want to ask you, but we got to start in the beginning, right? So,
Sure.
what got you interested in tech and in STEM, real quick, let me back up. I read your LinkedIn profile like I do for every guest. And I love the fact that you're on here because you're like one of the few people that we've interviewed so far that didn't go like the 4-year university route at all. Like you just went straight from high school into like different jobs and stuff like that. So, I'll open up the floor to you. How did you get interested in tech?
Sure. So I've always had an interest in technology since I was young. Like I've always been super interested just because I grew up in a military family. We ended up moving around a lot, and I always just gravitated toward technology just because we had some sort of access to it, mostly provided by the military. My father was worked in logistics. He was always getting decommissioned devices and laptops, and that was basically what gave me early access to these little notebook PCs before ultrabooks and things became a thing. Growing up, I started off with a really big interest in art. I used to draw a lot, and I wanted to find a way to combine my love for art and technology. So I started exploring different ways to do that, and ended up getting into graphic design and digital design because I found ways to take drawing and sketching and do it on a computer. And I was like, oh man, I can have all access to all these tools that I couldn't typically afford if I do it this way. So that ended up transitioning to getting into web design because after doing graphic design, I wanted to start building websites. And so I started teaching myself after teaching myself like Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, and all that stuff. I started looking at no-code website builders. And back then, Wix was really starting to get popular. It was still in its early days. Obviously, WordPress was king for a long time. And I started teaching myself how to use these tools to build different websites. And that kind of ended up transitioning down the road into working for a couple of small marketing consulting agencies. I did a lot of freelance work by pulling ads and stuff off of Craigslist when I was in high school, just trying to find any way to make money with these skills because I knew it was possible. And eventually that transitioned to a point where I realized I was hitting a limitation with the no code tools and the website builders I was using. I would look at websites like awards.com, that's spelled AWWW, like awards. And they would like basically showcase these really nice custom built websites. And I used to want to do things like that. Like, how do I build these like crazy animated experiences? And I knew that for me to do that, I would have to learn how to code. So that's kind of what set me into that pathway. Now, for a long time, I initially had to plan to go to the university route. You know, a lot of us grow up, we're told by our parents, you got to finish high school, go to college, do that and do that. Unfortunately, coming from a family that didn't have any generational wealth, I had nobody that was going to be able to pay for my college. So whatever I did, I had to figure it out myself. So my initial plan coming out of high school was to go to technical college. I had a scholarship. It was cheap and it was free at the time. I was going to knock out my basic classes and then transfer over to University of North Carolina. And that plan essentially didn't work out. Had a lot of issues with keeping that scholarship while also like bouncing my college classes with the work I was doing. And when I got accepted to UNCC, they ended up telling me that my GPA was basically a point shy of being able to declare my major. And for me, that was the whole point. I wanted to start my college, career only paying for the specialized classes because that stuff was expensive,
Yeah.
So when that didn't work out, I ended up saying, I don't want to do this college thing. I wasn't really about it anyway, just because I didn't really believe in the system behind how college works. I love education and I believe education is important. I just felt like the system was really rigged in the way that really barred a lot of, our community from being able to excel and succeed and even have access to it. So around that time, I started getting a lot of ads and stuff for the Coding Bootcamp that UNCC was hosting. And I battled myself for a long time on whether or not I wanted to take a risk on taking it. Because back then, which was about 4 years ago at this point, coding boot camps were still very new and very sketchy. Like there was no real, I tried looking at reviews, I do my due diligence. So I was like, this is thing I never heard of. So I tried to look up reviews. Naturally, they only had like 2 alumni at that point. They didn't have any real reviews of people saying, oh yeah, this was a real success, or there was a track record of some type of, proof that this was worth it. But I decided to myself that I knew that with my personality and the drive and ambition that I had, if I developed the skills to be able to build the things that I wanted to build, regardless if I had the essential education or not, I would find a way to build something with it and make a career for myself. So I took a loan, thanks Sally Mae, and I ended up taking the boot camp, graduated, and that changed my life.
Hey, so we're going to talk in great detail about coding boot camps. I did have one question though. I'm somewhat familiar with coding boot camps. I'm now starting to see like people do offer loans through Sally Mae and all that good stuff. Well, not good stuff, but yeah, they offer loans.
Yeah.
As like a military, as a son of somebody that's in the military, do you have access to using like the GI Bill for like coding boot camps, or is that only for universities?
So from my understanding, the GI Bill was only for universities. Like the coding bootcamp was considered continuing education. And as
Okay.
from what I understood, the GI Bill, it didn't qualify to use the GI Bill. And then on top of that, I didn't have access to the GI Bill anyway because my father had already used it at the time because he was at one point in his life taking certifications and classes to get into information security and information technology around like networking and things of that nature. So
Mhm.
if it was available or qualifiable, I didn't have access to it, unfortunately.
Okay, gotcha. Dang, your dad used up the credit. All right.
I mean, I don't
Um,
blame him. You know, he earned it.
yeah. No, I got you. Cool. Hey,
Uh,
man. So, I mean, you got something, Eli?
yeah, for yes. How old are you?
I'm 24.
You're 24 years old. Okay.
Yep, I turned
When
25 on the 29th of December.
Oh, okay. Happy pre birthday. It's coming
I
up
appreciate
soon.
it.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful to have accomplished so much in such a little amount of time, and to have such a clear vision of what's going on and what you want to do next. Quick question: were you working part time while you were going to community college?
Yes, I was. As soon as I turned 16, I was trying to work because in my mind, like I wanted to make sure that by the time I was 18, I could move out. You know, I wanted that independence, and I wanted to be able to have my own money to get the things that I wanted. You know, so my first job was working at McDonald's, like most people, and then I just kind of scaled up from there. I think in college, right around when I graduated, I was working at Best Buy, and between when I started going to community college, I went to York Technical College in Rock Hill and Rock Hill, North Carolina. And when I was there, I worked at Best Buy, and then I ended up leaving Best Buy to work at an audio video company called Bright AV, where I was doing home theater installation and networking and security for a lot of rich people around the Charlotte area. And then got to see some really nice houses. But aside from after that, I ended up going back to Best Buy, and then I ended up leaving to start working at T-Mobile. And I was working at T-Mobile when I was going to the boot camp, and then right after the boot camp is when I actually started transitioning into my software career. And then in between all that, I was doing side work, like on my own, freelancing.
Yeah, man. It sounds like you've been like a hustler from birth, almost, man. Like, kind of, you talked about working as a consultant for a graphic designer in high school and all that. So, I mean, you sound like a real go getter, and I can see that in your what you do currently. Um, I think I don't want to take it for granted that some people may not know like what coding boot camps are. Like, I think we're all familiar with them, but could you kind of tell us what is a coding boot camp, and how it differs from like four-year university or community college experience?
Sure, absolutely. So essentially, coding boot camps are, think of them like very high intensity, fast paced classes. They try and take the skills that you would learn in a college course over 4 years and shrink it down, usually within 3 to 6 months. So right now, when it comes to software engineering specifically, there are three typical pathways that you're starting to see. People are either self-taught because there's a lot of free resources, or even paid resources available on the internet. The typical route is going to the 4-year university, getting a bachelor's or a master's in computer science. And then what's basically had a meteoric rise in popularity as of recently is the coding bootcamp, which are when either universities or individual companies, or sometimes partners of both, will bring in instructors to teach these high intense courses. Like I said, usually either 3 or 6 months long, to try and get you the skill set necessary, almost like a trade school, to be able to get you into the industry very quickly. On average, they range in cost. Some are completely free, and they request a piece of your salary when you from your first job. Some, on average, the cost seems to be between 13 to 20 grand, depending on where you are and which courses you end up taking. But that's basically the crux of what it is. It's just a really fast paced, intensive, to kind of quickly get you skilled up on the relevant skills in the industry to kind of get you started.
Gotcha. Yeah, I love that because I mean, in college, you spend like 2 years doing basic courses or courses that you're never going to use again in your whole life. So I love that, paying what you're going to actually use. Since you mentioned like when you first started off, coding boot camps weren't really big. I know now they're more common, but there's still some cost associated, right? You said 13 to 20 grand. How do I make sure I'm not getting scammed? So like if I'm looking for a coding boot camp, what are some things that I should be looking for in order to choose the right coding boot camp for me?
No, that's an excellent question. That's something I'm actually planning to make another video about because I have I've heard people have mixed experiences with coding boot camps, and even when I was first, like I said, first getting started, they weren't super popular, but I still try to do my research and like look for reviews, try and see it, reach out to the alumni. A lot of times coding bootcamps are really good about getting their alumni or their graduates, especially the successful ones, to rep them afterwards. An easy place to look is on LinkedIn. You can literally type in whatever coding bootcamp you're considering, and I guarantee you'll find a bunch of people who have it in their, experience, history, profile, education somewhere. But to avoid getting scammed, the main things I would do is look for reviews. Reviews are a lot more common now because since more people are now, choosing that as their pathway, you're going to have a lot more information from people who have participated over the last few years. So definitely check out the reviews. Reach out to alumni if you have. Don't be afraid to, reach out to somebody, cold call them on LinkedIn. People are very friendly, a lot more friendly than you may believe. And they'll be happy to probably tell you about their experience. If they don't reach out, they could be busy. There's plenty of people out there. So I would definitely take a look at the alumni and see if people who are a part of an alumni are currently working in the industry. Because like I said, once you complete the coding bootcamp, most people are going to put it in their resume or their LinkedIn or something at some point. So if you look at a lot of the alumni people from a specific boot camp, and you see that they're working off in different industries or they're not actually a developer or whatever the boot camp was associated with at first, then that could also be a yellow or even a red flag. And the last thing I'll say is try and do some research on, if you can, on the instructors that are going to be teaching the course. If I had to distill everything into one point, these boot camps live and die by their instructors. Because when I was in my coding boot camp, I had an instructor. His name was Jeff Hoffman. Really great instructor, really good guy. He did an excellent job at teaching a variety of different learning styles. And when I left, my younger sister actually attended the same boot camp that I did. And she had her instructor change in the middle. She originally had Jeff Hoffman. He ended up leaving, had another instructor come in. And a lot of people had a very different experience than the one they had with Jeff. And I had another friend of mine who also went through the same boot camp who had a completely different instructor, and her experience was a lot more strenuous. So I definitely recommend trying to do some whatever research you can find on the instructors that may be teaching whichever cohort you might be joining. You might have to wait till a little bit further along in the application process, but before you drop any money or sign a check, definitely make sure you feel vaguely confident about the alumni, the reviews on the boot camp itself, and if you can find any information, the instructor themselves, to see if if they have a track record of being really good at teaching.
Hey, that's an amazing point. I didn't think about that at all, but I mean, college is similar. We used to always go to like ratemyprofessor.com and be like, yo, I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna avoid this professor. But I think it's even more important for the boot camps because it's such a short time window. And it's like, is that the only professor you're gonna be working with for the entire boot camp? Is that how it works typically?
As far as I understand, yes. They'll often have teaching assistants, which can be comprised of, previous alumni, because they pay. They're paying these people to participate, to help. So sometimes they'll have teaching assistants that may be other instructors or previous students, but for the most part, the instructor, unless something happens, stays for the entirety of the cohort.
Gotcha. Um, I got one or Eli, you got something you want to jump in real quick?
Yeah. In a boot camp, traditionally in a full year college, you have courses you have to take once or twice a week. In a coding boot camp, what is the routine usually in these courses? Is it in person or virtual? I know that might have changed within the last 2 years, but what has been your experience with that?
So my personal experience when I took it was it was in person, and most coding boot camps are going to offer two different pathways. Sometimes they may offer more, but the most common that I've seen is two different pathways. A very fast track pathway, which is usually comprised of 3 months. So my program I took was a 3 month program. They call it the full time program. Then they also have the part time, which is a little bit longer. In my case, it was 6 months. So your, timeline may vary, but there's usually, two different pathways that, relate like that. Now for me, my 3 month full-time pathway was every day, Monday through Friday. And sometimes they had office hours on the weekend on Saturday. So I was in class from, if I remember correctly, between like 8:30 or 9:30 to about 3 to 4 p.m. And at the time, luckily, when I was working at T-Mobile at the time, so luckily I had a manager who was able to schedule me for pretty much closing shifts every day throughout the week. So what I was doing, they highly advise against working while taking the full-time course. I mean, both, even though they say they market it as full-time and part-time, both are still very intensive because you're going through subjects very quickly. You're immediately applying what you've learned to building projects, and you're immediately moving on to the next thing, and those compound on each other as you continue on. So they expect you to be able to dedicate a certain amount of time outside of the classroom time to kind of, marinate and process what you've learned and also do the homework. So, but me, I happen to be a glutton for punishment, so I want to make sure I was still making my money because I had to afford rent while trying to get in the industry as fast as possible. So I was taking the 3 month course. But that's usually how I see it. How I've seen it is they usually offer two pathways. Now, most of the boot camps that I know were in person. Obviously, because of the pandemic, a lot of them have gone fully virtual. Some of them are doing hybrid or, have come back in person. But there's options out there for everyone. If you want something local and prefer something in person, they'll probably have something available for you. If you are okay with online, you have a lot more options just because you can participate in boot camps that are, hosted across the country if you wanted to.
Gotcha. So you shelled out somewhere between $13,000 to $20,000 for the coding bootcamp. If you had to summarize your experience, is it worth it?
For me, absolutely. So I paid, I want to say when I did mine, I feel like I remember paying around 13,500, 14,000. My friend who recently did it, I want to say she played closer to 15. But was it worth it? Yeah. So when my first job, I mean, it paid itself back, 3 or 4 or 5 times over. I was able to get in an industry. My first job I landed my first beginner junior developer position at 65K a year, which was amazing to me because, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a big business hub in the United States, but it's very behind technically. That's slowly changing as they start bringing more financial technology and medical technology in. But as far as like salary wise for developers, they weren't paying anywhere near what you would get like in San Fran or, in Texas or anything like that. But, when you go from making, 25, 35 a year to like suddenly hitting 35, 65, 70, you feel amazing. Right. So for me, that was immediately worth it just because I was able to double my salary pretty much instantly. And then from there, once you are into the industry and you start gaining some like verifiable experience, the world opens up for you. Like I have had an amazing. I'm very grateful, and I don't take for granted the progress that I've had. I have my progress in both like my careers, my skill set, my salary has again had a meteoric rise. Like it's been insane. So that's what got me so excited because when I was able to take that risk and then be able to realize the gains from that, I was like, yo, more people got to do this. There's so many of us who don't realize the level of access there is just because in my opinion, we've been socially conditioned and generationally conditioned to believe that STEM isn't for us unless you're a genius or you're really good at math or, that you have a 4.0, GPA that you can't get into STEM. When in reality, like you have opportunities in places like even with software engineering, like I hated math. I sucked at math. I loved science. I thought when I was younger, I thought I was going to be an astronaut. I was 100% like into that. But I sucked at chemistry and I sucked at math. Just because of the way that I think, I sometimes was missing little details and I hated what I hated most about math is that there was no wiggle room. It's very, binary, true or false, right? Either you got it right or you're wrong. And what I hated the most was when you're doing like going through these complex multi-step formulas or, multi-step equations or problems. If you miss something, a little thing wrong in the beginning, it throws everything else off. Right. But despite, my hatred for math at the time, even getting into software engineering, which in my mind, I believe that if I wasn't good at math, I wasn't going to be good at engineering. I've been able to completely disprove that fact. So yeah, basically it's 150% worth it. I will say that if had I could I do it again, I probably would have encouraged myself to do more of the self-taught route, just because like while the money I spent was well worth it and I did make a massive return on my investment, I also believe that I could have done the same thing even without spending it. But not everybody's like that. Some people need the structure, some people, need somebody to a reason or something to hold them accountable, that obligation. But if you don't, self-taught route is just as viable.
Awesome answer. Hey, I got 3 quick questions that aren't on the notes, and then I'm gonna let Eli take it over real quick.
No worries.
I'm glad you threw out the salary. I didn't have to ask you about that. I mean, I'm gonna ask about your salary later on in your career, but real quick, what coding boot camp did you go to? Were you a front end or back end developer? And how long did it take for you to get your first job?
So the boot camp I went to was sponsored by. It was actually a partnership between a company called Trilogy, which, believe it or not, apparently doesn't have a really good reputation, and the University of North Carolina. I was in the Charlotte campus. So essentially, the boot camp was called the UNCC Full Stack Web Development Boot Camp, or Full Stack Coding Boot Camp. So I came out a certified full stack developer, right? Using JavaScript. They taught us the MERN stack, which basically, for those of you who are, familiar with different languages, focused on learning like Mongo, Express, React, and Node.js. And they basically take you from 0 to 100, right? So they teach you everything, the basics from how the web works, to basics of HTTP and like, how the internet is kind of constructed. They teach you HTML, CSS, then they move into JavaScript, and then they start getting into the different languages and frameworks and libraries, et cetera, et cetera. After I graduated, it officially took me 4 months before I landed my first full-time job. Now, I believe I could have done it a lot faster, but what ended up happening was right when I graduated, I was in a Starbucks across the street from T-Mobile that I was working at. And I saw a developer sitting in the Starbucks writing code. So I already knew he was a developer, but naturally I walked up to him and I, tapped on his shoulder and said, "Hey, excuse me, if you don't mind me asking, sorry to interrupt, but are you a software developer?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, cool. I just graduated from, this coding boot camp. I'm a certified full stack engineer." And he laughed at me. He was like, "Full stack?" He's like, "You don't even know what that means." And at that point, that, intrigued me because I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" So we started talking, and he was a really great guy. His name's James Stolberry, and he became my mentor for the next 2 months. I ended up working with, he was basically the director of technology, lead engineer at a startup called Real Recruit, which was basically a risk mitigation platform for colleges, specifically around athletes, right? So I ended up talking to him. He was brought me on essentially as a mentee, and he was bringing me as to help contract on Real Recruit. That was going to be my first job, right? So I was starting to do contract work with them, and he was teaching me some of the basics and like setting up my own environment. And that was kind of my first experience, like joining somebody who already had a project, but did that for 2 months under the guise that I was going to be able to join a team full time. But unfortunately, around the end of that 2 months, the things just changed, and out of nowhere, I just kind of got dropped. Still have a really good relationship with James to this day. It was not at all his fault. It was just like something that happens with startups. You think you're going one direction, then you end up pivoting. So after that, I started applying heavy again. I was polishing my portfolio, my projects up, and I ended up getting my first job at a company called Armstrong Transport Group in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that was when I landed my first gig at 65K.
So, in developing your portfolio in preparation to finding these jobs, what steps do you recommend for anyone that's going through a bootcamp right now in order to give them a good position and to get a good job?
So there's a couple of things you can do, right? The biggest thing is that a lot of people are starting to struggle or feel discouraged because they graduate from a boot camp and think that's it. Like, I should be able to just get a job instantly. And I mean, if you have looked at any boot camps or you're in a boot camp, you've probably been told that, listen, they don't guarantee you a job. Nobody's going to guarantee you a job. But that's not the point. The point isn't to guarantee you the job. It's to get you the tools and the skills necessary to be able to land a job, right? In my opinion, the next steps should be polishing your portfolio, make it, presentable. It doesn't have to be super fancy. Doesn't have to have like these crazy animations and things of that nature. It just needs to be simple and serve its purpose of displaying who you are. Here's some of the projects you've worked on, etc. I think another thing that people forget to do is so for those of you who aren't developers, there is a platform called GitHub, which is basically a cloud-based platform that allows you to store your code on the cloud, and people use it for version control and things of that nature. So what ends up happening is a lot of times you'll go through a boot camp, they'll set you up a GitHub, they'll teach you how to polish your profile, and that's where you'll host all of your projects. But a lot of people have their projects, and I'm still guilty of this to this day, to be honest, and they won't have any information about the project in their README. So a README is basically a markdown file. Think of it like a fancy developer's Word document that is typically supposed to give you instructions on how to start the project up, how to use it, interact with it, etc. But for portfolio purposes, you would use that to describe like what the project is, why you worked on it, why you created it. Maybe for bonus points, you can go into some problems you face, how you overcame them, et cetera, et cetera. Basically telling your story of how you built this project, right? A lot of people graduate, they just have their portfolio, their basic portfolio, just have their projects, empty READMEs. So that's not a good look. I would definitely recommend polishing those out. Another thing is most people, when they're looking for a job, the first place that they check is LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn has become very saturated. Like you'll have plenty of jobs out there, and LinkedIn is a very valuable tool. But if you're using it in the way that most people are, which is the first thought of, oh, I'm just going to spam connections and just one click apply to every developer position I see, you're going to be competing with thousands and thousands of other people who are doing the same thing because it's so accessible, right? When it's easy and it's convenient, everyone's doing it. So one of the ways that's going to speed up your process for searching for a job is doing things that require, unfortunately, a little bit more work, whether that's using LinkedIn Premium. They usually give you like a 1 month free trial every year, and using your in credits to be able to directly message people who are in relevant positions to a company that you want to join, asking them for referrals or information, learning how to leverage your recruiters, or applying on other job boards outside of LinkedIn. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to apply on LinkedIn by itself. But again, it's a numbers game at this point. So I definitely recommend diversifying the same way an investor would diversify his portfolio. Diversify the way that you are applying for jobs. It's a little bit of networking. It's a little bit of like just cold conversations with people you meet in the street. And it's a little bit of applying on a variety of different job boards and talking to different recruiters.
In other words, networking.
Yeah, I mean, everybody says networking, but the thing about it, right? Like you could say networking, but somebody who doesn't know what really networking is, they're gonna be like, okay, everybody says that, but what do I do? Like that's not actionable advice, right? So I would really say like, try and figure, like there's plenty of resources out there. Like you said, I have a YouTube channel where I talk about this stuff. There's plenty of other great channels on YouTube who talk about getting your first job as a developer, because once you get your first job, it's very easy from there, to be quite honest with you. But yes, networking in the sense of reaching out to people. Don't be afraid to talk to people or to try and introduce yourself, because that's what's really going to set your chances apart. You want to increase the probability, you got to start, taking more chances and taking more risks. So yeah, I would definitely say that.
I'm curious though, as another follow-up, at that point, does the portfolio matter more than the degree attained?
Actually, it kind of depends. So I would say, yeah, if you're trying to, it depends on the avenue that you're using to secure your job, right? When I imagine the pathway and the difference between somebody who graduated college and got their degree versus somebody who was self-taught or had a boot camp, I would say it's a lot more likely that the person in college has networked with some people. And the way that they land their job is going to be through that network, more than likely, whether that's through a fraternity sorority connection, whether that's through their professor, whether that's through a recruiter they met through some college hosted event, or any other like advisors they've connected with. Chances are that's their in. And when that's their in, they can use that degree as, proof of, hey, like this, this college, it's a good name, I have reputation, give me a chance. And the company will be like, okay, I'm willing to take that risk. They seem pretty credible. They have a good background. They know such and such, whatever. Now, the difference is when you're coming from self-taught or boot camp, yes, 150% they're looking at your portfolio, or they're going to just, give you a code test and interview, because the idea is, hey, I'm a company. I'm going to take a risk on hiring. I want to decide if I should take the risk on hiring this person. And they obviously don't have a degree. They haven't come in with any network. If you did come in with through a network connection, excellent. You've just increased your chance of getting the job, dare I say 50, 60%. But aside from that, they're going to look at, either your portfolio, some work that you've done in the past, and, judge you off of that. Or they may try and give you some type of code task or a take home project, try and see what you can do on the fly. And or sometimes they might even do that. They may just talk to you and see, can you talk to talk? If you can talk to talk, some people will take that itself. You know what I mean? So I would say that's mainly the difference. I feel like a lot of people who graduate college, they're not going to have as much of a project portfolio. I mean, they may have a project portfolio, but I don't think they're going to have to rely on it as much as those who do not have a college degree.
Hey, so after you got this first job at the transport company, making $65K, what's kind of the next step from there in your career?
So I started working at Armstrong. Like I said, I got hired at 65, which in my mind, I already knew was low. But at the time, I was like, look, I just want to get my first position, and I'll go from there.
Mm-hmm.
About 3 or 4 months later, holidays started rolling around, and they was doing the annual reviews. They just went ahead and bumped me to 70 at that point. I was performing well. They went ahead and just gave me the raise to 70, which I'm really grateful for that. But worked at Armstrong for, I want to say, 1.5 years, and that was right when the pandemic was starting to take off. So halfway through the pandemic, everybody got shifted to remote, and I was excited because I was like, oh, wow, I get to work from home now. This is great. This is the life. This is what I was dreaming of, And I started having a lot of issues with how the company was being ran, just because there was a lot of little nitpicky things amongst the team and leadership styles and communication. But eventually I got to a point where the CEO at the time was really big on trying to get everybody back in the office. He believed that butts in seats meant productivity, and I got to be able to see it. And if people were in the office, he was a strong believer in the idea of serendipity, which just means these chance opportunities and occurrences of these wonderful ideas sparking by two people bumping into each other at a water cooler or something. But for me, I was twofold not with that. On one hand, I didn't want to go back in the office just because I really enjoyed working remote. My life was completely different. I already had a short commute because I lived right up the street from the office, but being able to just wake up and roll out of bed and just sit at my computer was great. I can make breakfast. I can do all this stuff. I had so much extra time that I wasn't able to realize before. But the second thing was, even though the country was reaching its peak COVID cases, he was still trying very hard to get people back in. Way before other companies were trying to, ease their restrictions or even talk about it. Right. So in my head, I was like, all right, I ain't with this. I already know that there's a lot of other companies out there who are working fully remote. And if not that, there's plenty of other companies who plan on staying remote at least till 2021 or, the foreseeable future. So put my feelers out there. I started, applying to a couple places. And 2 weeks later, I got my next job. I ended up working for a recruiting company called Kforce, and they are the ones who put me on a contract with the last company I worked at, the startup, which is called YesFit. So started contracting with YesFit, and I said, peace, Armstrong. I'm staying remote. Y'all can go back to the office if you want to. I put in my 2 weeks notice. I still left on great terms, and I have a lot of good friends and a really good mentor who I still talk to who used to work there. But yep, went from there, and then I ended up bumping my salary with that transition. I was able to bump my salary from 70 at the time to closer to 90. I want to say 93. Working at the other company, Kforce, and and I just kept going from there.
Nice. I'm keeping track of the money, man. You're going from 65 to 93 in less than 2 years. So that's amazing.
Oh, it keeps going, man.
Okay.
And this is
right.
and this is the low level, right? Don't get me wrong. Here's the thing about software, if I may interject real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. Take it away.
With software engineering specifically, and this also extends to cybersecurity and other technical jobs, you have a lot of different pathways you can go. Technically, if I really wanted to, I could have taken, a boot camp, or even after I graduated my boot camp, done some type of certificate or recruiting program at Facebook or Google or Amazon, and possibly landed a fintech job, been flown out to San Francisco, and I could have started my first job at like maybe 150, 160, something around those lines. That's totally possible, and it happens, right? But everybody has different, values and perspectives. For me, like I said, coming from making next to nothing and living check to check, and living in a fairly, at the time was, fairly low cost of living area comparably to, those bigger cities. I knew that for me, it wasn't just about making six figures, right? It was about like, am I making enough to where versus what I'm spending to put money away very quickly? And if you're living in, a place that costs you, I don't know, 30K a year to live in, with your rent and expenses and stuff, and you're making, 120, you're going to feel like you're living the lifestyle of somebody living in San Francisco. And also, I didn't want to move. And like, I'm really close to my family. I have my parents, my sisters, and everybody over there. So I didn't want to just jump across the country either. So yeah, I mean, for the area that I was living in, those jumps were significant. Like going from, like I said, 65 to 70, then 70 to 93. And then, just kept going from there.
Nice. Hey, so I'm gonna go a little bit out of order since you brought up money. So I mean, I think one of the great things about like pursuing a career in tech or STEM is like, number one, the opportunities for like all the cool projects you can work on, right? Like the opportunities are endless. Like you can take whatever passion you have and combine tech with it and create your own reality or whatever you want from that. So that's the
I'm
biggest
with
thing
you.
that I love about it. So, but close number two is of course the money, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
it's you taking yourself from, like, let's say you come from a low income disadvantaged community, you can put yourself in a whole new world, a whole new reality. Can you
Whole new
talk
reality.
about, you've already talked about like the salary, like the numbers wise, but in terms of like the lifestyle and opportunities, whether it's travel or networking, meeting people, can you kind of speak about that aspect of like one of the reasons why people should think about STEM?
Absolutely. So STEM in general, and like even with STEM, obviously I'm talking specifically from a perspective of like technology and software, right? And STEM is a very broad industry. There's so many different ways and places you can go. But yes, it's 150% a very 150% a lifestyle change. Like even again, like when you talk about lifestyle changes, like especially as somebody who at the time, like I was 21, 22, and like when I was able to jump double my salary, like I did what everybody young and making their new money does. I bought a new car. I have went from I progressed from very modest beginnings, right? But I bought
Yeah.
me my little Infinity, had my Q60. I was super happy. I was actually able to afford like modding my car because I was really into the car industry at the time. I could buy all that. I'm a really big tech geek, so I could buy all the like the tech stuff that I wanted. Whatever game systems is mine. Shoes, I could get it. Clothes, whatever. Like it was nothing, right? So like for
Yeah.
me, like the lifestyle change was very real. And then also just being able to put money away in a way that I hadn't been able to even envision before was, again, like the high was real. Just to put it simply. Now, aside from salary benefits, I mean, you get good healthcare. I mean, some places will give you stock. Some place when it comes to travel opportunities, depending on the company, some companies are going to fly you out, for maybe an orientation, or I got sent to different conferences, whether it was a tech conference or a company conference, and like for me, like travel was not something I was very used to. Like I was fortunate enough to be able to be a part of, like my family was able to afford travel through like a lot of cruises because we was able to get like good deals on a cruise line here and there. But being able to like fly out across the country, I didn't know what that was like, so being able to do that was very eye-opening. And when you start being able to have these different experiences, it really broadens your perspective of the world. The world suddenly just grows so much larger, right? And you start to realize how your localized world is so small. But there's, like I said, there's so many different benefits in the tech industry, and I just like to point to piggyback off what you were saying. Part of the reason why I started my YouTube channel was because not only do I want to be able to encourage people, but I 150% agree with you in the sense that if there are so many opportunities for you to combine whatever it is you're passionate about with technology, right? Technology is the frontier right now. I'm not even gonna say it's the next frontier; it's the current frontier, right? So this is something that we're actively pursuing and developing every day. And people will tell you, you're going to hear a lot of different mixed feelings about like, oh, you shouldn't get into tech for the money, or oh, you shouldn't get into tech for the accolades or for the stock, or for the San Francisco experience, whatever. the way I see it, everybody has their motives. My motive was money. I'm not even going to front. I was 100% in it for the money, because growing, like, my biggest thing, my purpose at the time was I want to set a different trajectory for my family. I grew up from a family that, they don't have a lot, and a lot of them are stuck in a very cyclical experience, generation to generation. And I wanted to be able to be a beacon of what you can do if you put your mind to it. And also be able to put myself in a position where I can start lifting up other people that I care about, my family and my friends, and help them start escalating. Because I believe that, I have this dream of building an empire, you know what I mean? And this is, unfortunately, even with all the caveats that come along with being in America, especially being Black in America, or Latino in America, or Latinx in America, there are some opportunities that, if utilized correctly, completely change the trajectory of our culture and our experience, like socially and economically. And I believe technology is a very viable vehicle to use to do that. So that's why I'm just trying so hard to I tell everybody all the time, anytime somebody asks me what I do, I'm like, yo, I do coding, technology, software. You can do it. Explore it if you haven't, because I guarantee you, even though you may feel like you're not cut out for it, it's possible for you. I 100% guarantee you.
Yeah, bro, I get so excited when we start talking about this, because I see the opportunities that are out there, and I don't think a lot of people realize it. Like, you went the $15,000 coding bootcamp route. You got Coursera, you got Udemy, you got all these other options that are even less expensive or free, a lot of cases, or freecodecamp.org. So it's just so many ways to get into tech, and it just has so many endless opportunities. You got like Coursera, you got Udemy, you can do it self-paced and all that. And I think I'm just really passionate about people pursuing tech, STEM in general, but also specifically tech, because the barrier to entry has gotten so much lower than what it used to be. So it used to be you had to go to college, you had to pay at least 20 grand per semester or per year to go to university, all those things. And not only that, but I think like tech is the one field where like don't even really worry about like what are you going to do for your entire life. If you get the skill set that you can gain from tech, you can apply that in any field. Like
Any
every
field.
job, whether it's whether it's a grocery store, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a tech startup, a football company, baseball, whatever, they are all looking for like people that have those technical skills. So I'm with you. Like, I'm so passionate about people pursuing this, because you can figure out what you want to do later. Just go get the skills, number one, and you can figure out where to apply them. If you want to go work at a church or a nonprofit or whatever, you can figure all that out later. Just get the skills and then go from there.
For real. I feel like I 150% agree with you, man. Like, it is so invigorating to consider how many different opportunities there are for everyone. Like, a lot of times I find that, at least from my perspective, when some of us make it, we feel hesitant to try and encourage and bring on other people, like to learn the ways that we made our money or got our success, because there's a lot of us out there that feel like, if everybody eats, I can't eat, right? But there's room for everyone to eat here, and it's only consistently expanding. That's the beautiful thing about like technology, and the virtual space is virtual, infinitely expandable. And there's always going to be evolving companies, there's always going to be evolving technologies, and there's always going to be a need for developers. Like, people think, like, there's a lot of people who are afraid right now that AI is going to replace a lot of people's jobs. And don't get me wrong, AI will eventually replace low skill work and some medium to high skill stuff. But there will always be a need for innovation. And we are, at least in my mind, very far from having automated innovation. So with that, that's one of the biggest, I think is one of the things that like has really propelled humanity as a species, is that we have an ability to innovate with new ideas, the ability to imagine. And because of that, we are able to continuously create new opportunities, new spaces, new pathways, right? And with that, all of us, I believe, are going to have plenty of opportunities to grow and develop and succeed and thrive. And I just try very hard to I just try to encourage people to just to pursue it. Like you said, you don't have to have your whole life figured out. I thought I had most of my life figured out, and then it fell on its head when my scholarship got revoked. So stuff can change all the time, and that's okay. Yeah. I think it is really important to just make sure that wherever you're going, you're moving. because like one of the things that really bothered me a lot when I was still in high school, or even when I was in community college and I was working at places like Best Buy or T-Mobile or whatever, I saw people twice my age, who some of them were comfortable, right? They were working the job not because they needed to, because they wanted to. That was, that what they enjoyed doing. But for those people there were a lot of people who claimed that they wanted more, they wanted something different, but they weren't making any moves to try and pursue that. They had been working, for a retail company for, 5-10 years or 3 to 5 years, not because they necessarily wanted to, but just because they didn't see they didn't see anything more for themselves. And I really feel like I have a purpose and a drive to break that perspective and to really try and expand the world that a lot of us are living in, to try and reveal all the other like pathways and opportunities out there. Because like I said before, like there's so many, and tech is just a very, very strong and accessible avenue to explore that.
Man, I could go on and on. Eli, you want to add something real quick? Well, excuse me, real quick before we go to the next point.
Yeah, one thought that came to mind, and I want to go back to a point you made previously. You referred to your YouTube channel, and which is a wonderful channel. I encourage everyone to watch it. Joxel,
Appreciate it.
Joxel. And
Yeah,
in one of your
thank you.
videos, you interview one of your colleagues and peers. That gave a unique perspective, his thoughts on college versus boot camps, those two different
Mm-hmm.
pathways. And I think you put it beautifully, the comparison between the two and how to choose one of the two. So maybe you could go through that and your perspective on the two pathways there.
Oh yeah, sure thing. Because I get that question a lot. Is like, a lot of people are wondering like, how do I know I'm choosing the right path? Like, some people want to go into college, but are enticed by the cost effectiveness of boot camps or being self taught, and some people want to go to boot camps, but feel like they have to conform to the traditional idea of going to college, or risk letting their family or their parents down or themselves down, right? Or afraid of taking any risks. But the way I put it is like this: when you look at the difference between a college and a boot camp, a college education is going to teach you the wisdom and principles behind using tools, right? So if I had to put it this way, like I would put it like building a house, right? Your goal at the end of the day is to learn how to build a house. Going to college is going to teach you how houses were historically made and why houses are made the way that they are today, the patterns that were put in place, the standards, and why they're effective. And they're going to teach you the wisdom and practices behind that. Boot camps are going to teach you how to use a hammer, how to measure, how to use power tools, and they're going to help you build a couple small houses. But the thing is, no matter which pathway you take, you're going to need both, right? So it's funny because you'll end up coming like people who go to boot camps are the inverse of people who go to college, right? Both at the end of your experiences, you still come out for the most part with no work experience. One person knows how to build a house, and they can build a house quickly and effectively, but their house would probably not stand up to the house that another architect has built who's been doing it for years, right? And somebody who has come out of college knows why the standards are put in place, knows the standards very well, knows the codes and everything, but they don't have a lot of experience using the tools to actually put it to practice. So they always end up intersecting or converging in their paths, right? So for me, the way I look at it is like it comes down to just deciding what's important to you. I still to this day can like wonder like what my life would have been like if I did attend college, because college is so much more than just education. It is a whole experience, right? I firmly believe that you have the greatest opportunity to make some of your strongest connections, both relationship, like friendships, and even like career and business networking connections in college, because that's what they're designed to do, right? You're surrounded constantly by people who are taking either a similar or the same pathway as you, and you're with them day in and day out. A boot camp, I've seen these people for 3 months, and that's it. You know what I mean? So if you value the wisdom and also the credit, the merit that comes with having a degree, it is 150% worth it, because that wisdom and that knowledge is only going to propel you as a developer or whatever you do in your industry. But if you're somebody also who is just looking to trying to get into industry quickly, you want to make a career change, or you want to jumpstart your career or kick it off, and you maybe maybe college is not necessarily accessible to you right now, which is totally okay because college is expensive here in America. Boot camps are a very viable option because they're cheaper. They teach you the tools to get started very quickly. And, if you have the drive and the ambition, and you can easily learn the wisdom behind that with the power of the internet. The internet makes things so accessible. I 150% believe that. And I don't get me wrong, I still try and be wary of the line. Like, I'm not somebody, even though for a long time I aspired to the whole notion of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and like, there's no reason you can't succeed in America, et cetera, et cetera. I know better, especially now as I've matured as a man and I've expanded my perspective. But for those of you who do have access to the internet, there is a wealth of knowledge. And a lot of it starts with just knowing where to look or what to look for. And the thing is, just take it piece by piece. Like if you decide to go to a boot camp, start trying to, research, design patterns and principles about, to help solidify why you're using the tools that you're using, et cetera, et cetera. And then if you're somebody who has that more that more academic and traditional scholastic knowledge from a college education, it's just as simple to go and try and find out how to learn the tools through other pathways like Udemy, Coursera, et cetera, et cetera. But the biggest thing for me is that it's just understanding that because of the beautiful age that we're in now, where everything has become so accessible, your opportunities are limitless. Like that is, if there's anything I could try and instill to anybody listening, is that especially people who are in my community, the Black and Latinx community, no matter what you've been told or what you think there is so much more out there. And all you have to do is seek it. You don't even have to know what to seek. If you just like focus on just the desire to seek, to learn, to search, I guarantee you're going to find something. But yeah.
Preach, bruh. All right, cool. I'm getting excited. All right, man. So while you were speaking, it reminded me of something, like just having the desire to seek and learn. I don't know if I was on Google or Quora or whatever, the website where you ask a bunch of questions and people answer. I think I was looking at some meme where they were like, hey, being a software engineer is like using Google 90% of the time to try to figure out what you need to do. Can you kind of talk? Can you talk about like the day in the life of a software engineer? Like, what does your day typically look like? What kind of problems are you typically working on and things of that nature?
I'll speak from like my last experience working at YesFit, right? And it's pretty, standard for the most part. Most companies follow similar standard of practices. Usually you'll hear things like Agile and Scrum, et cetera, et cetera. Essentially what that means is your day starts off at whenever you're expected to show up at work. For me, I was remote. We had stand up at 9 a.m. Stand up was basically a meeting we had every morning where we talked about what we worked on the previous day, what we plan to work on that today. And then if we had any blockers or anything else we wanted to share, we did that there. It was meant to be like a quick touch base, jump off starting point for the day. Usually we try to keep it under 15 minutes. But if you got a good team and you get along well, sometimes you end up joking around, it lasts longer. But after that, you get straight into your task, right? So a lot of software and companies will work in these things called sprints. Sprints are basically these set periods of time, usually 2-3 weeks, sometimes longer, that basically segment off the different periods of time in your timeline or product roadmap. And in those sprints, you'll get assigned tasks, right? So if you're a singular developer, I'll get 4 or 5 tasks on my board of varying estimates. We use estimates to basically determine how long a task would take on a quick high level, and that determines like how much work we have on our plate for a designated sprint. So after I get my stand up completed, I'll review what I'm working on today. Usually I'm somebody who likes to I'm learning how to become more organized because I'm ADHD. I jump from stuff all the time. So I've gotten into the habit of kind of like almost like taking a journal or a diary. I call it a dev log, where I basically like write down some of the information that I do throughout the day. And that gives me a place to kind of refresh my memory, like a save point in the game from the previous day. So I usually go through that, check my emails, check my Slack. Slack is a communication platform for a lot of businesses, basically like IM or SMS, but for businesses. And I get started from there. I'll work, all the way up till 5-6 o'clock. It depends. I mean, I've had times where I can complete my task super early and I'm done by 3 and I'm chilling for the rest of the day. And I've had times where like some stuff was very complex and I was working late in the day and, I was kind of crunching a little bit more. But it all kind of depends on the company you work at, what the work culture is like or the business culture, and, the tasks that you're working on. in between, I started going to the gym. I live in an apartment complex. I have a fitness center across the street. So on my lunch break, I'll go down to the fitness center because I work remote. So I can have that, ability and not take too long. Usually they give you about an hour lunch or whatever. And then when I finish working out, come back, I'll usually have some food in the fridge that we've cooked from the previous day, heat that up, eat it, and then get back to work. Some days, if I've, grinded through some stuff, I can, play some games, chill out. And then other days, like I said, I'm grinding out till 5 or 6 o'clock. And that's pretty much the day, man. I mean, it's very simple. So a lot of people try and glamorize like what it's like being an engineer. And that's, don't get me wrong, there are glamorous aspects depending on, your workflow, your team, and, what company you're working at. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. To touch on your other statement about Google searching, yes, 100%. Being an engineer, you're solving problems first and foremost. Now, solving a problem may be figuring out how to write a new feature. So at YesFit, I worked on a website and a mobile app, and sometimes they may want to add a new page to the website or a new feature to the mobile app, and we had to figure out how to make it happen. And a lot of that comes from researching different technologies that we can, piece together like a puzzle to make the picture that we want to make. When you're actively coding, you're never going to memorize all the stuff you're doing, especially like I work primarily as a front end developer. I am full stack, so I do switch back and forth sometimes, but my strongest point is front end because I have a visual design background. So I naturally lean that way. And front end development, to give people some context, front end development is basically the software developers who write code that basically affect everything you see, whether it be on a website or on a mobile app. Everything you're interacting with, that's considered the front end. And the back end is all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes with servers and APIs and things of that nature. But over time, like now with the advent of, with different web technologies, mobile devices, all of the technology, before back end used to be like the more difficult, more strenuous, more complicated part of development. And then for a long time, back end, there was no such thing as back end or front end. It was just all coding, all developments, all software, right? Now, since we're getting into web and mobile, people starting to split it up a little bit. But now, because of all the new technology coming out on the front end specifically, it's scaled up in complexity. So now we're working just as hard as, back end developers. So you're churning through so much information all the time, whether you're working with new technology or reading new documentation or trying to learn new ways to do things, that you're never going to be able to memorize everything. So I say all that to say, we're always Googling stuff. That is a skill. And it's more so, it's not even just Googling, but learning how to break problems down into smaller problems and focus on, chunking things. They call it chunking, right? Being able to you see chunking in all forms of intelligence. When we like language is chunking, we are able to take these sounds in small pieces and we call them words. That's chunking, right? So being able to chunk down larger problems into smaller ones and then research information to kind of help, solve those individual problems. That's all a part of what being a developer is.
You mentioned a lot about like a lot of these different technical roles that require coding experience or coding knowledge. Can you talk about any tech roles that don't require computer programming experience or knowledge that you're aware of?
Oh yeah, there's a ton of tech roles. Yeah. So for those of you who want to get into tech and want that flexibility without having to necessarily learn how to code, there are so many different options for you, whether that's sales, customer service, support, communications. For example, I had a friend of mine, a really close friend, who also went through a boot camp. She ended up landing a job at HP as a solutions architect, which requires no coding knowledge. Like she's making great money, like just under, like I want to say when she first got hired, she was making, she got brought in at what, 90, 93, like straight out. And that was for a solutions architect role, which is more so like a kind of like a partner at that particular place, was more so a partnership between like a technical salesperson. They have technical knowledge, right? But they're primarily, like, their purpose is to communicate with clients or communicate with customers and listen to their needs and help them create a solution that's tailored to what they're looking to solve, right? And for whether that's like a specific set of servers or a specific set of products or cloud tools and services, whatever. There's a lot of sales positions out there that will offer you a lot of money, especially if you're on a commission, that don't require any real coding knowledge. It's going to be like you learn everything. Even though it's dealing with technology, you're still learning stuff the same way you would anywhere else. If I get hired at T-Mobile, like I'm working at T-Mobile, but guess what? I'm going to learn all the intricacies of different smartphone models. I'm going to learn their specs, their features, what they're good at, what they're not good at. And I can take a customer who comes in saying, this is what's important to me, and I can recommend them a model. Same thing can go anywhere, whether that's the car industry or the tech industry. Everything's going to sound foreign at first, but you're going to pick up a lot of that stuff on the job. And they're still going to have training and things of that nature to familiarize yourself. But you'll be working in tech with all the tech benefits, especially if you're working remote, and you'll have that flexibility that kind of comes along with it. And then from there, you can transition wherever you want to go. So that's one big one. Like I said, solutions architect, you got, technical support, which even if you're not a super tech savvy person, as long as you can, if your soft skills are strong, you can go anywhere. And soft skills being communication, being able to, really it's all about communication. Can you take complex ideas and break them down for people to understand? Are you good with talking to people who have, a lower literacy rate than you? Can you explain things like you would to a 5-year-old really well? Are you respectful? Can you speak highly? Do you speak, good enough about yourself when you're in an interview? If you have all that, there are so many different other ways that don't require any really knowledge work that you would get in an engineer or a developer role.
Gotcha. Dope. Thanks for highlighting that. I think that's really important. So we got 2 more questions left. We're coming up towards the end, but I gotta let you talk about the 50K in 100 days challenge that you started, right? So I found out about this on your YouTube channel. I think it's really dope. Can you kind of explain the 50K in 100-day challenge that you're doing, and then how are things progressing currently?
Yeah, man. Whew, man. Like I said, part of the 3-month roller coaster that my life has been, right? So long story short, I had that one developer that you had mentioned. Well, actually, this is another developer. I have interviewed a couple on my YouTube channel. There's another developer named Nicole Young. Definitely check her out if you're anybody who's looking for inspiration. She's a Black woman in tech. She's self-taught. Also took a boot camp afterwards. And she's, basically dedicated her platform on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok to just teaching people, specifically minority and underrepresented women, how to get into tech and leverage a lot of the resources that are out there. And she goes by Nicole.Young on everything. So basically, I had reached out to her. I had met her a while ago because I had reached out to her on Instagram to interview her. I'm still working on trying to create a playlist on my channel, 2 playlists actually, that feature women of color and men of color in technology in some way, shape, or form, where I basically do what you guys are doing right now, right? You're just interviewing people who took different non-traditional pathways into tech. And my thought process a few years back was that if I could create a couple playlists that highlight these people, anybody who's looking for inspiration can go look at this playlist and see all these different people who look like them, who have taken these different pathways, and be inspired and motivated, right? So she was the first woman that I had reached out to, and she immediately accepted. I interviewed her, and that kind of started our relationship. And long story short, I ended up reaching out to her at this point a month and a half ago. And she had just finished her boot camp. We finished doing her TA stuff there. And she was talking about how she had posted a story in which she was explaining how she didn't want to jump into the traditional 9 to 5 as an engineer. And she wanted to take more of an independent or freelancer approach. And at the time, that was something I was really interested in because, I was trying to see, I always wanted to build something myself. But one of the things that I struggle with as, a neurodivergent person is I'm always jumping from thing to thing. So it's very hard for me to commit to one thing at a time. So I figured, hey, she has the same, essentially a very similar audience to mine, same social goals. We have the same values. Maybe she'd be willing to partner with me on something crazy. And from there, I would be another source of obligation I would have to kind of see something through, you know what I mean? So I reached out to her. We started pitching a couple of different ideas, and she was like, oh yeah, a lot of people are doing 100-day challenges towards the end of the year. So on September 22nd, there was going to be 100 days left before, the end of the year on December 31st. She was like, maybe we can do some type of challenge. I was like, oh yeah, we could try and maybe do make a certain amount of money in 100 days using just our tech skills. So that's how we came up with the 50K in 100-day challenge. And initially the plan was that we had architected was that we would create a suite of digital products that we could that would be targeted towards entrepreneurs and solopreneurs of color, creatives of color who are trying to launch their digital businesses, provide them with a set of tools that will help them do so quickly, and we could leverage our audiences to essentially like, market and, funnel a lot of traffic into sales. And the idea made like perfect sense. And she has even now has a much larger following than I do right now. So I figured that like, with that, she would have a lot of support and it would be something that would be very viable, even with the number that we set, which was 50K. So we started going through the process. We set up an LLC, had a business account, bank account, like credit card, a whole thing. We got everything set up. We was recording our videos and content. We, while simultaneously learning how to work with each other, dealing with some of the things that come along with being, startup founders and, in technology. She had some things that she was dealing with, like learned behaviors that she was dealing with as a woman, especially in the space. She has a couple of videos on that. I definitely recommend checking those out. And it was a really fun experience. But unfortunately, as of recently, she ended up dropping out of the challenge because she decided that she really wants to focus on scaling her brand, which she was doing anyway. But she really wants to scale her brand and focus on that, as well as some other reasons that she has that's personal to her. So she decided that she wanted to just focus on that. So at this point, I'm still in the challenge. Technically, it's not December 31st yet, so there's still some time. So I'm at a point now where I'm trying to change the direction that we were going, instead of just doing the digital products, just because that a lot of the following that I was, hoping to also combine with is now no longer going to be there. So I'm having to adjust my approach. But one of the things that I'm actually looking at doing now is the company we created was called Umber Society. And I still have the LLC and everything in my name. And essentially what I want Umber Society to be is a platform that connects new budding or aspiring software engineers to mentors and professionals in the space. Because what I've noticed in this industry is that there's two barriers to our community right now. The first one was just learning how to learn and getting access to those, learning resources, whether that was, not being able to access college because of expenses. Then boot camps became, a thing. And now, a lot of people are trying to, using boot camps. There's a lot more resources out there for learning for free and being self-taught. So I feel like that barrier, for the most part, has been fairly broken. The second barrier that I noticed, and I only recently noticed because I've encountered it myself, and then also I've been able to connect with others in the industry who are around the same space that I was that once you're in the industry, what's really crucial to your development as an engineer or as a software developer, or really anybody in tech, if you want to grow, you have to have some type of mentor, somebody who has been in the industry for a long time and they can tell you how to move and how to navigate. Because just like for a lot of people in the beginning, you didn't really there was no true guide or direction of like which pathway I should take for learning how to code or learning how to do whatever. Once you're in the industry, you realize, there is no clear direction on how do I, get promoted, or how do I make the salary I want to make, or how do I get to these spaces that allow me to eventually become my own founder or my own business, business owner, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that I wanted to try and do was create a space that connected these more highly driven, highly motivated, highly ambitious people with other peers in their space. Cause that's hard enough as it is. Just trying to find other people like me who think that I do and who want to work as hard as I do and build something. That's been a really difficult thing for me throughout my entire life. But then on top of that, trying to find mentors to help guide me, who want to help, propel me and help teach me the things that they've learned from their experiences to avoid, things that slow down their career. So that way I can accelerate my growth. That's something that I want to be able to connect that group of highly focused individuals to. Because I feel like once you combine those two things, that's where magic happens. Because now their growth is now catalyzed by the guidance provided by people who already have gone through the experience in some way, shape, or form. So their potential is more likely to be actualized or realized because they're not going to be slowed down as much from, pitfalls or, setbacks that they may have stumbled upon, organically. They can now circumvent those and just, accelerate their growth that much more. So that's what I'm working on building Umber Society to do now.
That's awesome, man. I love the mission behind that, and I think it's extremely valuable. And I'll say one quick note about that before I get one last question in. I just found out recently about an organization called Career Karma, and their whole idea is to like build that sense of community And I mean, I think people are really starting to see the value of like, hey, it's cool to kind of learn on your own, but when you have a community around you, you have that support that you're trying to provide. I think that's when people really accelerate and they get that catalyst to kind of propel them to that next level. So I wish you all the best in that, man. I really hope that you do like see that through, because I think it is needed in both the Black and Latino communities, you know.
Yeah.
Cool. I got one last quick question for you before Eli takes home with the big question of the show. So we kind of started off with you telling us about like what you're working on now, what you're kind of up to. I just kind of want to open it up for you to kind of tell us about your next steps or like your future plans, right? So you kind of talked about Quirk Chat, which is a really cool app, and you're potentially going to be joining their team. But I'll just kind of let you take the floor real quick and kind of tell us what's your next plan or your future goals for yourself and your career.
Oh man, that's a big platform to leave me on. There's so many things I want to do, man. Like I'm in a place now where I've been, even over the last few days, like I said, I just flew back from Tulsa, and my experience there was literally life changing. Just being able to meet the people that I've met and be surrounded by people like me, people like us who look like us, who are building things successfully and are being supported and uplifted by a community of not just family and friends, but investors and guides and, like, you know, networks of people, very powerful people who are trying to propel these, you know, to propel us to build and create and accelerate our community, or accelerate the growth of our community. And I know that I have a space in that. I don't know where it is yet. I know that I realize now that, one, I belong in a startup space for sure, because I just have that growth, that tenacity to want to just, again, build and create things. And when I really connected really well with B Law, like I said, the founder of Quirk Chat, and she, you know, reached out to me to try to talk about an opportunity working with her, and I will be joining her team as a founding engineer. Because for those of you who don't know, Quirk Chat is an application that's currently, you know, it's out and available on Android and iOS. Shameless plug, but basically it's going to be the home of geek fandom, the conversation for geek fandom. So for everybody's a geek about something, I happen to be a geek about a lot of things: gaming, technology, anime, you know, Marvel, DC, all of it. And Quirk Chat was designed to give people like me and people of my community a space to be able to congregate, meet people who have shared interests, and do so in a safe environment. Because one of the things that's really tough that I experienced, especially growing up, like middle school, high school, you know, if you're that alternative kid into alt culture, like, you know, you have all kinds of things you experience, from bullying to shame, whatever. And then growing up in the advent and the internet age, where people were, that experience was then, like, you know, magnified by, you know, anonymity. So you have every social space, whether that's on Reddit or Twitter or YouTube, Twitch, anything. You see people, especially like Black creators, just getting, like, you know, attacked ruthlessly just because there are people out there who want to tear down those communities, what's being built. So we're building the future of an application that will be not only the home, but a safe home for us to be able to, you know, connect and grow as a community. So I believe in I'll directly align with her product, which is why I'm joining it so early, and I'm going to help facilitate its growth and its creation. But that's one, you know, career pathway that I'm taking. On the other hand, I'm still planning on, like I said, building Umber Society to be something great. Because it's funny, I created the name Umber Society. I created the name Umber because I'm really big into, like, symbolism and deeper meanings, because I believe when you're crafting a brand, people want to really connect with it on a deeper level, especially when you think of, like, brand story and personality. That's the future of marketing. People now don't want to just be advertised to in any way. They want to have some type of connection. And I wanted to build a brand that was directly rooted in the space that I'm a part of, the community that I'm a part of, right? So Umber, for those of you who don't know, Umber is basically just it's a pigment, it's a color that's like a very earth tony color. And I created the name Umber Society because I wanted to be able to take the acronym us as if I'm creating a space for us to be able to, you know, catalyze our entrance and our grand exodus and migration into the tech industry. Because I feel like it's imperative for more of my community, or more of our community, to join the tech industry and to start building, especially with the advent of Web3 and, you know, the new frontier of the metaverse. Because we've already seen the repercussions of these, you know, high level technologies being built by people that don't look like us, right? Like you think of like the bias that exists in artificial intelligence, the bias that exists in algorithms. Everybody shouts to the heavens that we need our own social media platform because these platforms aren't working for us, because they'll take our content and leverage it in a way that gives us no benefit. In fact, that puts us down while other people can profit off of it. So I feel like the only way to combat those things is for more of us to have the power of that in the participation in the creation of those spaces. So I'm creating Umber Society specifically to try and put in a place where those of us who are really ambitious, who really want to build something, and even if you're in a place where you don't necessarily have it's in you, but you don't know where to start, or you don't have, or maybe you've gotten started, but you don't know how to continue to grow. I want to build that space for us where we're able to, catalyze that growth. So those are the two directions specifically that I'm going, and I have no idea how fast it's going to happen, but I know it's coming quick. So
Dope. I love it. Keep at it, man. It sounds like you're building a FUBU of tech for us, by us, I don't know if you remember that back in the day, but yeah, man. And Quirk Chat, I love it. I love the idea and the concept behind it. I'll definitely be on there geeking out about like Demon Slayer and
Oh
Attack
yeah,
on
man.
Titan and anime and
Claim your
stuff.
name
But
now.
yeah. All right, Eli, I'm gonna kick it over to you, bro. Take us home, man.
Joél, this was a wonderful conversation, and thank you so much for making the time for us. However, we always like to end the interview with a big picture question. And the big picture question coincides with our mission statement, which is, how can we get more people of color, more people from our neighborhoods, Black, Brown, Latinx, and everyone in between, to pursue more careers in STEM? In particular, and you're alluding to this, positions of leadership that have the control to make these changes, right? Speaking of Marvel, if you had the Infinity Gauntlet and you can snap your fingers, what would you change? And this can be in terms of national policy, local policy. It could be something that a person can do. What would you change to bring about the systemic change that's sorely needed in STEM?
I like that. That's a really interesting question. What would I change? So I think for me, I feel like the initial thought process is everybody would initially say, "Oh yeah, I would go way back in time when all of this first started, and flip flop it, right, or do something crazy like that." But I feel like that doesn't solve the issue. So I'm gonna stick to a scope that I feel like I can better conceptualize all the outcomes, which means I'm gonna have to stay within my timeline, right? So for me, if there's anything I could change, I'll tell you what it would be. So essentially, the reason why I was in Tulsa, long story short, joining QuirkChat, B-Law, I've only known her since September. It's funny. I went to a convention that she had a couple years back with some friends, and I didn't even realize that was a convention that was hosted by her and her company, right? So part of that, and us, hitting things off so fast, and me being all into the vision of QuirkChat, she had got sponsored to attend this boot camp that Lightship had from that Lightship Foundation had created, and she extended the invitation to me. She was like, "Listen, I know it's last minute, but I'd love to fly you out. You can participate in a boot camp with me. We'll get to know each other and see each other in person, but also we can participate in this together." And for me, like, it's funny because like 10 years ago, like, that would have been considered like crazy, insane. Like, oh, you're gonna fly out and meet somebody you never met on the internet? Like, what? But for me, like, I've been feeling like I treat my life like it's a video game, like it's a movie or an RPG. So like anytime I see some like wild circumstances, like I feel I have a tug to see it through, to take the chance, right? Especially now, like while I'm young, you gotta take all your risks while you're young. That's where all the magic happens, right? So, and I'm really glad that I accepted that, because like it's been literally life changing. I was there for 4 days. I flew in on a Monday. The boot camp was 2 days, and then I flew back out yesterday on Thursday, and got in super late. And what I experienced in Tulsa was something I never thought I would see, right? And so for those, like, everybody knows Tulsa for like the historic, the history behind Black Wall Street and the Tulsa massacre and how everything got tore down. Long story short, Tulsa is working very hard to not just rebuild Black Wall Street, but to do something even far greater. Like, they're offering like the city itself and a lot of the organizations within are doing a lot of things to lift up Black and entrepreneurs and startup founders of color, and they're giving them like all these resources, whether it's free co-working spaces, and I'm talking about like WeWork level full on co-working spaces, right? Resources for venture capital funding, investments, support, legal docs, whatever. They're doing everything they can. And to be in a place in which I see a bunch of people who look like me, even within the same like age band of, 2 to 5 years, who are out here doing things and building stuff, and they have this this supportive community. Again, not just of like family, friends, but I'm talking like millionaires and billionaires and invest in these, $1 trillion funds whose purpose is to try and uplift these people to build things. I would snap my fingers and I would create one of those in every city. Because I live in DC right now, and I thought that moving here, like I would see that immediately, right? I haven't seen it yet, and I'm sure it exists. They had Startup Week a couple of weeks ago, and I missed that. So maybe there's a lot of spaces like that. But even like when I was talking to other people in that cohort, there was one brilliant girl that I met there. Her name is Aaliyah Marandis. She's a founder of Sugar Dough, amazing company. She created these. She basically created an at-home sugaring kit for hair removal, and in less than 2 years, like she's almost hit 2 million revenue. She's killing it right now, and she's over in Austin. Same thing. She was like, I haven't seen this here yet. I thought, being in Austin's, on track to become the next Silicon Valley. All the tech companies are moving to Austin, Texas right now. For some reason, we don't see these spaces. We don't see that where the support is happening, and maybe it's there, maybe it's not, but that visibility is necessary. Because if what's happening in Tulsa right now was happening everywhere, where you're taking people, you're providing the visibility, you're guiding them on how to take their idea from ideation to production, right? To design, development, and production, and you're grooming them to be successful business, startup founders, and then funding them afterwards once they meet all the criteria. Like it's going to be, it would be life-changing experience for the entire community. Because then you actually finally starting to have these groups of successful entrepreneurs, these successful, people of color who are really trying to reinvest in the community. And if I could just take that and drop it everywhere in every neighborhood, the government wouldn't know what to do. It would have to be a massive backlash just because of how quickly our culture and our community would accelerate in this growth. I guarantee it. So I just want to be a part of that. You know what I mean?
That's dope, man. I got to get to Tulsa and see what's going on. I do know that they have like a $10,000 grant for people that are like willing to relocate there. But yeah, I got to definitely check it out, man. And I can't say it enough, bro. We really appreciate you for coming on here and like sharing your story and all this advice, dropping all these gems. Like I feel like we could just take your episode, give it to a high school kid, and tell them like, "Yo, watch this." And you'll be set.
Just wait. I'm working on creating a 0 to 100 for people in high school who want, because I think back now when if I was in high school knowing what I know now, oh yeah, I would have been 6 figures at 20. Like it would have been nothing. Right. So and then there's so many things I want to get into, but yeah, I feel you. Like I'm trying to create all kinds of free content on my channel and stuff just to try and accelerate people. But no, I really appreciate you guys for reaching out to me and obviously giving me a chance to share my story, because this is literally like what I feel like my purpose is. Like I'm not doing this for money. I'm not doing this for fame or notoriety. I could care less about that, because I know I'm gonna get rich one way or another regardless. For me, this is serving my purpose of trying to uplift my community, specifically the Black and Latinx community, because that's the community that I was born into and I'm directly a part of. And that's the one that I want to be able to directly impact. You know what I mean? But I am very grateful, and it's really great to meet you guys.
Dope. Yeah, we're gonna be talking some more. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. But
I believe it.
Yeah, I'm excited to work with you on some other things, man, coming forward.
Absolutely.
Great.
All right, Eli.
Yeah, thank you, Joel, and thank you for joining us today and sharing your journey. Please check out his YouTube channel, Joxel, Joxel. And in those in his videos, he goes in much more detail about tips and tools of how to get into that working space, and also on his does you do video logging, right? Blogging on that channel as well. So check that out for sure. For Custom Journeys, I'm Eliseo. This is our podcast co-host, Andrew Baines, and we're out of here.